Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 1996. Piper Striley is abducted from her own home, and the only two witnesses are her two young children, Nathan and Shayna.
The little girl told him there was a mean man.
He yelled at her to get on the floor.
She yells to her children, "Run and hide, run and hide."
Carried off her mother, and they left in a black car.
2 years earlier in 1994, another woman, Larissa Jamansky, vanishes from a parking lot never to be seen again. Could these two cases be connected?
He was not going to be denied this woman.
And if they don't find her, she could die.
Are they on the hunt for a serial killer in Sioux Falls, South Dakota? On the banks of the Big Sioux River, Sioux Falls, South Dakota boasted a population of 100,000 in the mid-90s.
We get a little bit of everything. We get what everybody else gets, we just don't get as much of it. For a lot of years, particularly 1995 through 2003, 2010, South Dakota averaged about one homicide, one murder, one intentional homicide a month, statewide. So not a lot. You get some, you just don't get very many. We just have a relatively low crime rate compared to other jurisdictions.
Sioux Falls is known as the healthiest city in America. A massive meatpacking facility is one of the largest employers in town and has been since the city was founded.
Sioux Falls is the largest city in the state of South Dakota and was an excellent place to grow up. In fact, the city had twice been ranked by national magazines as being the #1 city in the United States of its size to live based on education, housing, low crime rate.
"28-year-old Piper Striley and her husband Vance moved to South Dakota to pursue their dream of opening a full-time church. For now, they build a place of worship in the backyard of their rural home.
They were trying to start a church on their property, on their acreage, and they had pews set up outside. They had an archery range.
They had intended to build a church there, but all they really had at that location was a little swimming hole that they'd made out of a stock dam. They had an open-air picnic shelter.
They were just in the process of buying a church that was being sold and having it moved to their property so they could start their own congregation.
Originally from Rio Medina, Texas, Piper meets Vance in Bible college in Oregon.
So they had the same views in life. They had two young children, Shayna, and then her little brother, Nathan.
To pay the bills while they build up their ministry, Vance works as a plumber, while Piper works as a home care worker in Sioux Falls.
Vance worked every day, 6:30 to about 5. Vance left for work that Monday morning and said, you know, I'll call you over the lunch hour to find out where the kids are going to be, because sometimes Piper used a local babysitter and sometimes she used grandma. Vance's mom, who lived in town in Sioux Falls, And so he leaves.
"9:20 a.m. Piper calls the babysitter to say she's on her way with the kids.
Piper called the babysitter and said, "I'll be over at the usual time," which would have been about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But that's the last anybody ever heard from Piper.
By noon that day, Vance has received 2 phone calls, one from the daycare and another from Patty Sinclair, Piper's co-worker, saying that Piper hasn't turned up for work. When Vance calls Piper to check on her, the answering machine picks up instead. Around 3 o'clock, Patty Sinclair calls the Striley home again, and someone unexpected answers the phone. Patty hears the distraught voice of Piper's daughter, Shayna.
Young Shayna answers the phone. Shayna is almost 4 years old. The co-worker asks, "Is your mommy home?" Shayna says no. "Is your daddy home?" No. "Is there a babysitter?" Shayna says no. "They're all killed." And then Shayna hangs up the phone.
Well, of course, the worker's very concerned. She calls back and they have the 911 operator on the phone as well, and Shayna answers again.
This time she was hysterical. She was crying, her mother was gone, she wasn't coming back, didn't know where her father was.
She asked her, "Well, where did mommy go? When did she leave?" And Shayna says, "A mean man in a black car carried mommy away. I don't want mommy to die. I don't want daddy to die. I don't want them ever to die."
And the 911 operator is giving her some information to ask Shayna to try to get more out of her, but she's a little 3-year-old girl, almost 4.
And then Shayna hangs up the phone again.
So the 911 operator called the McCook County Sheriff. And so all the McCook County Sheriff knew at that point was that there was these 2 little kids who were home alone without any adult supervision.
Given the seriousness of the report that's been made at this point, the sheriff's priority is really on the well-being of the children.
Police go to the Striley residence to check on the welfare of Shayna and her younger brother, Nathan.
He visited with the little girl a little bit, but he wasn't able to get much out of her. So this is about 5 o'clock in the afternoon by now, and the phone rings, and the sheriff answers the phone. And it's Vance, it's Dad, calling because he can't find his kids. That's an interesting conversation because, of course, Dad doesn't expect the sheriff to answer the phone at his house. Of course, the sheriff isn't sure that Vance isn't part of the problem.
The minute Vance got home, obviously, the authorities are always going to look at a close relative. They asked Vance not to talk to the children, to stay outside so they could talk to the children more. As the investigators continued to talk to little Shayna, she kept saying that a mean man took Nathan's tent, his play tent that he just got for his birthday, and the mean man carried mommy away and left in a black car. With that, the investigators talking decided that Vance probably didn't have any part of this. So they bring Vance in, and immediately Shayna opens up and starts saying more and more about what happened.
Shayna tells police that a mean man driving a black vehicle with black wheels comes into the trailer and grabs their mother. The man stole Nathan's blue tent from his bedroom. Shayna says there's a lot of yelling and that the man shoots a gun.
She yells to her children, run and hide, and they do.
So one of the first things they do is they set up a roadblock out in front of the Striley residence to stop anybody going by to see if any local residents nearby had seen anything. Well, they happened to stop the county road grader, the driver that's responsible for keeping the gravel roads smooth in the rural areas. And the road grader driver tells them, yes, I was coming by here earlier and I did see something strange.
He was coming one direction on the road, a vehicle was coming the other direction, and it was a very distinct vehicle. There was a CB antenna and some other distinctive features about it. But when that vehicle got about 100 yards away, it did a U-turn, went into the ditch, and went the other way. So he thought, well, that's odd, and he's grading the road. A couple hours later, he comes back, and that same vehicle is coming from a different direction, now from an east-west direction. And he noticed where it went, and then later on, when he ate his lunch, he saw that that vehicle was parked by the Striley house.
And so now the authorities are saying, okay, we have a vehicle that made a suspicious U-turn, so they were starting to focus on this vehicle.
As police secure the property, Vance Striley takes his kids to their grandparents for the night, fearful of what's happened to Piper. While in bed, Vance suddenly remembers that a man came by the house the previous Friday.
And he had a distinctive black car. And he also remembers the man's name.
Is it possible that Vance has met his wife's abductor? Sioux Falls, South Dakota, July 1996. Vance and Piper Striley run Bible camps for the kids in the area. Their dream is to someday offer a church here. But a stranger turns their dream into a hellish nightmare. Piper Striley's young daughter, Shayna, says a mean man in a black truck carried her mother away. Later that night, Vance Striley comes to a gruesome realization. He may have met the man who had taken her.
Vance remembers something. He remembers that the previous Friday, there had been a man who showed up at the house about 7:30 in the morning.
And Vance notices in the driveway a black Bronco, an SUV. Pure black, flat black. It looked strange. Even the rims were painted black. The bumpers were painted black. He thought it was very strange.
He said, well, I have 4 kids, so I want to know about the camp. And Vance says, well, why don't you give me your name and your phone number, and I'll call you about it, and then next year when we have the camp, you can come.
So Piper comes out with a piece of paper, gives it to the guy, and he writes down his name and address.
And he gives that to Vance, and Vance knows where he puts it. He puts it in a drawer where he keeps that kind of thing.
Well, they take the place apart, and they cannot find the note. But they do get this information out of Vance that the guy said his name was Robert Anderson. Anderson told him the reason he was familiar with the place was because his father, Anderson's father, lived on Doc Schaefer's place, which was on the same road about 2 or 3 miles north of where the Strileys lived.
Investigators now have a name to run a check on, as well as a description of a vehicle, a black Ford Bronco, that they can cross-check. They also know the name of an Anderson, Leland Anderson, who happens to live close by.
So they run a record check for motor vehicles. This is now midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And they get 275 vehicles registered to Robert Anderson in South Dakota.
Investigators need to dig deep into the playbook to locate their Robert Anderson.
One of the authorities said up near Lake Vermilion, there's a man by the name of Leland Anderson that lives up there. So they checked the records, they got a phone number for Leland Anderson. One of the investigators calls that number. A woman groggily answers the phone, and the investigator just makes up a story. He says, I'm sorry to call at this time of the morning, but I'm an over-the-road trucker and I'm looking to buy a vehicle from Robert Anderson. Is he home? And the woman says, no, that's my son. He's a night shift worker at the Morell's meatpacking plant. And he's working right now.
Investigators rush to the parking lot of the meatpacking plant in Sioux Falls, searching for a black Ford Bronco registered to a Robert Leroy Anderson.
All the information coming into investigators at this point is starting to sort of come together. Things are heating up a little bit, so they want to act on the information as quickly as possible. Robert Leroy Anderson, whose parents live a couple of miles from Piper's place, owns a Ford Bronco, and he works at the meat plant. So things are starting to come together here.
And they find the Bronco that matches Robert Leroy Anderson's license plate number. They're very upset that it's not black. So now they wait. They stake out the Morell's parking lot and they wait until Robert Leroy Anderson gets off work.
Robert Leroy Anderson, owner of a blue Ford Bronco, drives home and goes to bed. He's a married man and a father of 4. Police don't believe this is the man who kidnapped Piper Striley.
Someone's a suspect, they have to at least eliminate that person as a suspect, and they think this is going to be real quick.
In the interest of conducting a thorough investigation, investigators would want to interview anybody that potentially was involved or may have seen something or knows something about the event. So that interview, if it's not necessarily the suspect, would be considered an elimination interview just to gather all the possible information.
So the investigator, who is very seasoned, goes to Robert Leroy Anderson's house and says, I'd like to ask you some questions. Robert Leroy Anderson says, okay. And right away, the investigator sees red flags. When somebody comes to your house and says, I want to question you at the police station, you say, why? What happened? Am I a suspect? What's going on? And he was just so calm about it.
Robert Leroy Anderson drives his blue Ford Bronco to the police station for an interview.
They have a conversation with him. And he tells them that he was the same guy that was out at the house Friday morning. He acknowledges he was there. He acknowledges the conversation with Vance and the essential nature of the conversation. And then they say, well, have you been out there since then? Well, no, he said. And then one of the officers says, well, is there any reason someone would tell us that you had been out there? And he says, well, yeah. Come to think of it, I was out there yesterday. And then he goes into an explanation that he did go out there to try to get permission to use the archery range, which Vance was working on out there. And he knocked on the door.
And they said, well, why would we find your fingerprints on the door? And Robert said, oh, well, I guess I did go up and try the door, but nobody was home, so I just turned around and left. So now they have this perpetrator admitting that he was at the Striley residence and left his fingerprints there.
The whole instance is eerily reminiscent of the missing Larissa Dumansky, a Ukrainian immigrant who disappeared from the parking lot of a local meatpacking plant 2 years prior. The same packing plant that Robert Leroy Anderson works at.
As police are investigating, they uncover another missing woman who actually worked at the same place as both Piper and Robert. So there seem to be a lot of interesting similarities between these cases, and they're starting to see a possible connection here.
The American dream was on the verge of coming true for Larissa and Bill Dumansky. Larissa was very pretty, very well-liked, very intelligent. She spoke several languages. And the Dumanskis made many friends in the amount of time that they were in the country.
Larissa Dumansky and her husband Bill moved to America in 1990 and work at the John Morrell meatpacking plant. They have 2 daughters, and Larissa works the night shift so she can care for them during the day.
And so Anderson knew Bill Dumansky, Anderson knew Larissa Dumansky, and they both knew him.
Larissa Dumansky vanishes on August 28, 1994, and is never seen again.
They'd interviewed hundreds of people, but by the time Larissa disappeared, Anderson didn't work on her line anymore. He had changed jobs from working on the line to being a night maintenance man. So he worked a different shift, he worked in a different department, and had been for some time. And so nobody made that immediate connection until he was connected to the Piper Striley case. And then they started actively working the Dumansky case again.
During the 7-hour interrogation, Robert denies any involvement with the disappearance of Larissa Dumansky.
He might lead them to where Piper is, so they need to keep him talking. They're afraid that she might be held somewhere, and if they don't find her, she could die. So they keep him talking. They didn't tell him this. They kept talking to him, but behind the scenes, some of them went and got search warrants to search Robert Anderson's body, his Bronco, and his house.
First thing that they do, and this becomes very important, they take Robert Leroy Anderson back for a strip search. And the first thing that they notice is he doesn't wear underwear. That seems a little bit odd. And when he emptied his pockets, they noticed there were handcuff keys on his vehicle key ring. That doesn't set very well. Not very many people run around with handcuff keys on their key ring.
Police search the blue vehicle belonging to Robert Leroy Anderson and discover something hidden beneath the floor of the cargo area. It's a board which appears to enable the user to shackle a person to it.
A discovery like this could be potentially compelling evidence. However, there are some major issues that need to be overcome at this point. All the witnesses indicate that the suspect vehicle was a black Bronco, completely black. The problem is this vehicle is blue and white.
They search his Bronco. He's a pack rat. So they're finding all kinds of bags and receipts. They're finding receipts for hand sprayers, for duct tape, for eye rings, and brown jersey gloves. And they find some of those items in the vehicle as well. Receipts for paint, for some tempera paint.
.393 craft paint that was purchased on Thursday, 16-ounce liquid bottle. And it looked like it's black finger paint is what it is. It's water-based paint that kids use for watercolors and that sort of stuff. So we had the cash register receipt. One of the DC agents took the receipt and went to the store where the purchase had been made and said, if you thinned that out and painted it on a car, would it wash off? And she said, you know, you're the second person this week who's asked me that. And he said, well, you suppose you could pick out the identity of the guy you dealt with? And she said, sure, I'll try. So they took the same photo lineup out there, and she picked out Robert Anderson as the guy who had bought the black paint on the previous Thursday.
August 2nd, 1996. Robert Leroy Anderson is charged with the kidnapping of Piper Striley.
It's been less than a week since Piper went missing, and she could very well be found alive. The fact that they've arrested and charged him doesn't negate the fact that they have to continue with a very thorough investigation to determine where she is.
There were a couple of toolboxes in the vehicle. One had tools in it. The other one had kind of odd stuff in it. A couple of cans of spray paint, tear gas cartridge, a set of X-Acto knives, a skein of red yarn, one of those big nylon tie-downs like you use to tie stuff down in the back of a pickup. And it had a bunch of vegetation in the bottom of the box that was relatively fresh. I mean, it hadn't dried out like the leaves falling off the trees in the fall. It was more like the leaves had been pulled off and ended up in the bottom of the box and were 2-3 days old.
Investigators sent the vegetation to a local expert.
The botanist could look at the plants, for example, that were found and determine where specifically that plant would be known to grow. That could be vital in solving this investigation.
This stuff only grows in a riparian area, that is to say, along a waterway. And he said it only grows where there's tree cover, where you're close to water, and where the cattle have not grazed. He said, you gotta go over by the Big Sioux River, which runs through Sioux Falls, at least 30 miles away from Striley's. And you have to look there because that's the only place you're gonna find it.
They got a whole bunch of police volunteers and they came out there and they started combing that area. The botanist was right on the money. They found half of Piper's nightshirt cut off there. They found a wad of duct tape that was rolled up with head hairs on it. They found a battery-operated vibrator and a burnt candle. The roll of duct tape that they found in Robert Leroy Anderson's Bronco, they unrolled it, and they unrolled the wadded up piece of duct tape that they found along the river, and the ripped off ends matched.
Investigators suspect Robert Leroy Anderson has raped and killed Piper Striley. They also suspect him in the disappearance of Larissa Dumansky 2 years earlier, but they don't have enough to press charges. As Anderson's kidnapping case goes to trial, law enforcement uncover a key fact in the case. Robert Leroy Anderson did not work alone. Sioux Falls, South Dakota, July 1996. Investigators believe they may be dealing with a serial rapist and murderer.
They're putting 2 and 2 together. This guy doesn't wear underwear. Piper is menstruating when he takes her. He has raped her, and her blood is in his blue jeans. Now, the back of the Bronco, they find some very disturbing evidence. They find the homemade bondage board. They find a couple of toolboxes. One of the toolboxes, the investigators named it the torture box. It had ether in it to knock somebody out. It had eye rings. It had bindings.
Sometimes evidence and witnesses can come to the police's attention in very unusual and unexpected ways, and it looks like that's what happens and how Glenn Walker first comes to their attention here.
Glenn Walker is an old friend of Anderson's, a friendship that Anderson exploits.
The way that Glenn Walker first comes to the attention of police is through some answering machine recordings that they uncover. And so these answering machine recordings show Glenn Walker talking about how they went to Piper's because they were looking for a church for his mom. And everyone knows that this sounds strange and doesn't quite seem to make sense in the circumstances.
During Piper's trial, when Robert Leroy Anderson was being tried for kidnapping, somebody came to the investigators with a recording, answering machine tape, and in it, there was something with Glenn Walker trying to say, oh, hey, remember that I told you that we were out by Piper's house because we were trying to find a church for Robert's mom? It sounded like Glenn Walker was trying to make an excuse for Robert Leroy Anderson. So they knew now there was some kind of connection, but they didn't know what it was.
Glenn Walker and Anderson were childhood friends, and Walker also worked at Morrell's. So Morrell's was a focal point for a lot of the folks involved.
But Glenn Walker was a follower. Robert Leroy Anderson was a dominant personality, and he eventually talked his friend Glenn Walker into becoming involved.
So they subpoenaed Glenn Walker to come to court every day. They had no intention of putting him on the stand because they didn't know what to ask him, but they wanted to make him nervous, and it worked. Because then he said to them, well, I do have some information about Robert Leroy Anderson, but I want immunity for it. And they said, well, before we can say we'll give you immunity, we need to know, what you basically what you know. And he said, well, I know where Larissa Demansky's body is buried.
May 20th, 1997. 2 weeks after Robert Leroy Anderson's trial for the kidnapping of Piper Striley, Glenn Walker leads police to a bushy area near Lake Vermilion, where he says Larissa Demansky is buried.
They did exhume, and they did not find very much of Larissa's remains. They found a few bones, a few scraps of a blue jean.
And within that evidence they obtained, they were able to identify Larissa by DNA.
Forensic scientists find a total of 57 pieces of evidence related to Larissa, which include a tooth, a rib, the bones from the left and right wrists, several fingers, a right foot and ankle, jaw bones, and fingernails. They also find working gloves, shell casings and bullets, Larissa's shoes, a part of her belt, jewelry, and pieces of her clothing. It doesn't appear that the shallow grave has been disturbed, and they don't know why only part of her skeleton is buried here. Without enough hard evidence directly showing guilt for murder, Robert Leroy Anderson is given a life sentence for kidnapping Piper Striley. But Anderson's cellmate, Jeremy Bruner, comes to law enforcement with what he says is enough to convict Anderson of Striley's killing.
There's a statute in South Dakota that says that nobody can be convicted of a homicide unless the death of the victim is proved, and that it was done by the perpetrator is proved beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a statutory obligation that you have to prove. We weren't sure we could prove it the first time around, but the second time around, when we had Bruner's testimony, we were much more comfortable.
Jeremy Bruner is very smart, very cunning. He knows how the prison system works. Robert Leroy Anderson did not.
When Bruner got to the pen, he paid somebody 2 cans of chewing tobacco to make up a rap sheet for him, which suggested that he was a big-time gangbanger and cocaine dealer and had beat a federal murder rap in Oklahoma. Well, that would give him status.
And Robert Leroy Anderson wants to know, how did you beat a first-degree murder charge out of Oklahoma? And Bruner said it really was pretty easy. I found a guy that had no alibi. I had items from the crime. We planted it in the guy's house. We tipped off the authorities. They found that evidence. This guy didn't have any alibi, and a good attorney got me an acquittal. Robert Leroy Anderson said, wow, do you think you could do that for me? Now Jeremy Bruner, a light bulb goes off, and he goes, I might be able to get something out of this guy.
A jailhouse informant is someone who the accused is in custody with, who they've decided for whatever reason to confess their crimes to. In order for the prosecutor to decide to use a jailhouse informant as their main witness, they're gonna have to be really confident that that person's going to come off as a credible witness.
And one of the prison officials said, look, Bruner, the state's attorney general isn't just going to come down here because you said you've got some information. You need to give us something a little more. So Bruner is shrewd. He plays an ace right off the bat. Bruner tells the prison authorities, look, you guys think that Robert Leroy Anderson took that little Nathan's play tent the day he abducted Piper to wrap her body in, but that's not the case.
Sioux Falls, South Dakota is gripped by the possibility of a serial killer and sexual sadist in their midst. Convicted only of kidnapping Piper Striley, prosecutors have all their hopes riding on convicted felon Jeremy Bruner to get Robert Leroy Anderson on rape and murder convictions for both Piper Striley and Larissa Demansky.
They have a saying, an inmate's testimony is worth a bucket of warm spit, because they might just be saying it to get themselves out of trouble.
So Bruner is shrewd. He plays an ace right off the bat. Bruner tells the prison authorities, look, you guys think that Robert Leroy Anderson took that little Nathan's play tent the day he abducted Piper to wrap her body in, but that's not the case.
He said he took the tent because he shot a hole in it with a 9mm pistol while he was wrestling with Mrs. Striley to get her out of that trailer house. And he said the bullet went down through the floor of the trailer and the shag carpet covered up the bullet hole, and you guys missed a bullet hole in that trailer. Why don't you go look for that bullet hole and then come back and talk to me? And so we did exactly that. We sent somebody out there. Vance rolled back the carpet and there was a bullet hole there just where Bruner said it would be.
So the authorities do go out to the Striley residence. They pull the carpet back. There is indeed a bullet hole in there. They insert a metal rod that gives them the angle of the travel of the bullet. They crawl underneath the Striley trailer house. They dig with their bare hands and they get the 9mm slug that went through the floorboard.
With the information he gives authorities, Jeremy Bruner gains credibility. Bruner tells law enforcement where to find a treasure trove of damning evidence against Robert Leroy Anderson, based on what Anderson himself admitted to Bruner in prison.
Robert Leroy Anderson goes, look, in my mom's house, downstairs in the basement up in the rafters by my childhood bedroom, I stashed the 9mm pistol, handcuffs, and I've also stashed jewelry that I took for souvenirs off both those women. I'll draw you a map, and you can go in there when my mom's not home.
We find a 9mm pistol. We find Piper Striley's engagement ring and wedding ring. We find a hollow heart-shaped locket which Bill Demansky had given his wife as a gift, which she wore regularly and she was wearing the night she disappeared. We find the clip for the pistol, and we find a pair of handcuffs.
With Bruner's testimony, prosecutors can tell the court what they believe Robert Leroy Anderson did to Piper Striley on July 29, 1996. After stalking Piper Striley for some time, Robert admits to an abduction attempt on Friday, July 26th, but is surprised to see Vance is still home because of Bible camp. He leaves his address, but comes back the following week.
Robert Leroy Anderson was obsessed on taking Piper Striley. He was not going to be denied this woman that he wanted to rape and abduct. So the next Monday, on July 29th, he goes back to the Striley residence, but now he's brought the 9mm handgun with him. He needs more control. And his plan was, if Vance Striley was there that morning, he was going to shoot and kill Vance and take Piper anyway. That Monday morning, Robert Leroy Anderson knocks on the door. Little Shayna, who's almost 4 years old, answers the door. Robert pushes his way in, and he meets Piper coming down the hallway. He yells at her to get on the floor. Piper refuses. He shoves Piper back down the hallway and into one of the children's bedrooms. The gun goes off. The gun shoots a hole through one of those little vinyl play tents that kids can sit up in their bedroom. He finally gets Piper wrestled to the ground on her stomach. Piper is screaming for Shayna to grab her little brother and go run and hide. And he handcuffs her, hands and ankles. Robert Leroy Anderson then picks up Piper, throws her over his shoulder, and starts carrying her out to his SUV. When they get out to the parking lot and he tries to put Piper in the vehicle, Piper is still struggling and fighting. Robert Leroy Anderson shoots the 9mm handgun off near her to frighten her some more. The semi-automatic 9mm spits a spent shell casing into the Striley driveway, but the sound of the pistol unnerves Robert Lee Anderson. He needs to get out of there. He looked for the spent shell casing, but he couldn't find it. So he puts Piper in the vehicle and hops in and takes her away.
Robert Leroy Anderson comes back to the scene of the kidnapping twice.
Robert Leroy Anderson took Piper, but then he remembered that he had left that piece of paper at the house. So they go back and he makes Piper show him where that piece of paper is. He takes that piece of paper, they leave. They come back another time. He was also afraid that he'd left a shell casing as well. So he came back twice. That's how bold he was.
On the ride, he's taking her to a secluded area that he has along the Big Sioux River. Very vegetated, very tall trees. She's shackled to the bondage board. Robert Lee Anderson proceeds to cut her nightshirt off and rapes her repeatedly and sexually tortures her.
Piper's body was not recovered. Robert Anderson said that he brought her to a log jam and put her in there so that she would get caught in the logs. A lot of people don't believe that. First of all, he had been successful hiding Larissa's body, and he treated it as his property. It was something he went back and visited to recreate the crime. It's very common with people who are sexual sadists who take trophies like that, who take a necklace or a ring. It's more likely that he put her body somewhere where he could go back and visit it. And he's hoping that when he tells Jeremy Bruner this information, that he's going to get out of prison, he's going to be able to go back and see Piper's body. So it's more likely that he buried her somewhere.
Thanks to the testimony of Jeremy Bruner, the court finds Anderson guilty of the rape and murder of Piper and the kidnapping and murder of Larissa 2 years earlier.
The other thing is we identified half a dozen other women that he had followed around and stalked and at least considered kidnapping. And we were able to identify some of these women, and so we got some of that evidence in as well.
Robert Leroy Anderson is sentenced to death. He exhausts all appeals, but prior to receiving a lethal injection, he hangs himself in his cell. While evidence shows that Piper Striley's body was dumped along the river, the spring of 1997 saw what many call the flood of the century. An event that placed nearly half of South Dakota underwater and makes finding her body next to impossible. Despite this, investigators still search for her remains to this very day. In a small-town motel, a woman is approached in the middle of the night. The way guests filter in and out of motels could mean an endless pool of suspects.
One strong possibility is that Alice knew her attacker well enough that she didn't suspect anything until it was too late.
Unfortunately for 59-year-old Alice Pepperell, not everyone is who they appear to be.
We started saying, well, Drifter's done something bad. Drifter did something wrong.
And a city's 30-year streak without a murder investigation is forced to an abrupt end. Oakley is a small city on the west side of Kansas, populated by just over 2,000 people. While Oakley is the county seat of Thomas County, it is situated between Thomas, Gove, and Logan counties. The city's claim to fame dates back to the Wild West. In 1864, William Cody and William Comstock compete in a legendary buffalo hunting contest just 10 miles west of Oakley. When the contest ends 69-46, William Cody earns a cash prize and the title of Buffalo Bill Cody. With a cultural center in his honor, the town of Oakley takes pride in that one of America's most famous cowboys claimed his name in the area. The city is founded 20 years after the contest in 1884, though it isn't until 1956 that the population begins to grow. It's at this time that the I-70 highway is constructed, opening new possibilities for those who choose to settle their lives here. For many travelers, the only interaction with the city might be through one of the motels. Alice Pepperell starts working at a local country club motel a few years ago, hired by the owner, Jeff Harsh. Known for being shy and quiet, she starts to open up more while working there and becomes dedicated to her job. Alice lives her entire life in the Logan County area. She's a mother of 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. But she divorced from their father years ago. The motel houses more than 20 rooms. Sitting on the business route of Highway K83 on the north end of Oakley, it's a perfect rest stop for weary travelers passing between the larger cities. Alice regularly works nights at the motel. Because of these late shifts, she has her own room down the hall from the main office. Alice's work ethic does not go unnoticed. She becomes the manager's right hand in managing the motel. In early December of 1988, Jeff books a ticket to leave town with his wife to attend a conference in Barbados, leaving Alice to hold the fort in Jeff's absence and ensure the motel runs smoothly. But Alice won't be alone in the motel, thanks to the housekeeping staff. She's friendly with her coworkers and often lends a helping hand. Also working in the motel is Dennis Perkins, a recent hire brought on to do some painting. And of course, there is always a few guests that filter in and out of the motel's rooms.
This is a typical roadside motel. It's not very big. It's about 20 rooms. These types of motels, particularly, when they're located right next to a highway, are really used by people passing through, and people cycle in and out on a regular basis. The problem is that you never really know who's staying at the hotel and for what purpose.
By the evening of December 6th, Jeff has left town for his conference. Alice is working her usual night shift. And as the night goes on, housekeeping staff leave for the night. Dennis finishes up his work for the day. He earns a daily wage of $15 that is paid out by Alice. He has a room in the motel, but doesn't plan on spending his evening there. Instead, he's going out to a local bar to spend his earnings. Alice does her usual duties around the motel, including emptying the day's profits from the cash register.
As an overnight hotel worker, Alice actually lives at the motel. She takes care of the guests that are coming and going at all hours of the night. It's well known by all the employees that Alice keeps a special quarter in the cash register at all times for good luck. And this is a quarter that has a hole pierced through the middle, so it's very distinctive.
Very little is known about Alice's exact movements throughout the night. More than likely, she treats her evening as any other, helping guests, doing her usual duties. But what we do know is that at some point in the middle of the night, Alice passes through the hallway from the office to her room.
Well, it was late at night, so there wouldn't necessarily be a lot of people moving about the motel at this point, but there are in fact guests staying there, so she wouldn't really think anything of it.
Oakley, Kansas hasn't had a murder in 30 years. But that streak is coming to an end. Oakley is a small city in Kansas with a population of just over 2,000 people. It's a place full of history, most well known for its connection to the Wild West stories of Buffalo Bill. While relatively few people make their home in Oakley, its proximity to major highways keeps the city active. Alice Pepperell works at a local motel where people passing through frequently stay. Alice's boss leaves for a trip to Barbados, and she looks after the business in his absence. For overnight shifts, Alice even has her own room in the motel. Oakley is a peaceful city, going on 30 years without a murder within its 1.93 square miles. But that streak is coming to an end. In the morning of December 7th, one of the motel's housekeepers arrives at work. At approximately 10:15 a.m., she enters Alice's room. She discovers Alice's body on the floor next to the foot of her bed, naked and with a knife protruding from her abdomen. The housekeeper calls the local police, and the authorities arrive at the scene at about 11 a.m. The coroner assesses the body and is able to approximate the time of death to around 2 to 10 hours earlier. There's obvious signs of strangulation, small stab wounds in her chest, and a much larger wound from the knife still inside of her. But there needs to be a full autopsy before establishing which of her many injuries is the true cause of death.
Upon first viewing, there's still a weapon that is left within her body, and there's still evidence that is around her neck. So an autopsy will determine the exact cause and manner in which she died. An autopsy will reveal even defense wounds or things that have occurred within her body, and it is the only voice for the victim. So then we can understand what has occurred to this poor soul.
The police explore Alice's room in search of evidence, but the room itself contains almost no signs of any struggle taking place.
Well, every crime scene is different, and they can be massive or they can be very small and limited to a very contained area. You know, the absence of physical evidence can tell one story, just like a room being ripped apart with, blood stains and furniture tossed over can also tell a story. So what we're seeing here tells us that perhaps Alice knew the attacker and she didn't suspect anything was wrong until it was too late.
But does the state of Alice's room point to her having been close to her attacker? Or would she be so trusting with one of the motel's guests? The only thing out of place in Alice's room is that her curtains have been ripped down. This could be a sign that at some point Alice tries to get away, or even fight back. But without any other damage to the room, it appears her efforts aren't enough. Alice's nightgown is found next to her on the floor. On closer inspection, the investigators discover it's stained with blood. Whether the blood belongs to Alice or her attacker, they'll have to bring it in for testing to find out.
Investigators locate Alice's nightgown. It was on the floor, and they do, upon closer examination, find a small bit of blood on it. But they're not sure at this point if it's Alice's blood or potentially the attacker's blood. At this point, police need to take the nightgown into evidence, and they need to have it examined so that they can narrow down a list of suspects based on a comparison to the blood that's found on the nightgown.
In search of a motive, the police search the rest of the motel for signs of anything missing. When they look through the motel's office, nothing appears to be out of place. The cash register is found locked. After getting inside, they discover there's only 47 cents left inside the drawer. Without knowing how much money there should have been, The police can't yet determine if anything is stolen, but Alice's lucky quarter appears to be missing. Alice's body is sent to a forensic specialist in Wichita for an autopsy. It wasn't immediately clear on the crime scene which of Alice's many injuries killed her. Forensics will need to investigate the coat hanger, the extension cord wrapped around her neck, as well as the knife wound in her abdomen.
So the forensic specialist that performs the autopsy on Alice makes the determination of death to be asphyxia by the extension cord that was wrapped around her neck. So that indicates that there was no airway left and she was unable to breathe. She also sustained injuries that were consistent with stab wounds to the chest, and there was also a 7.5 centimeter knife that was left on the victim. So that knife, after autopsy, showed that it hit an artery, but she had already been deceased, so therefore an arterial bleed did not occur. Otherwise, if the victim had been alive, she could have bled to death. So it also indicates in the autopsy that she was a victim of a sexual assault after she had been deceased.
As the investigation sheds more light onto what happened to Alice, it continues to beg the question as to who could be responsible. Signs point to her not suspecting them until it was too late. Can the police track down the killer before the trail goes cold? The investigators searched for answers by trying to gather information on the motel itself.
When starting an investigation, the investigator has to be open to all possibilities. And it's often said you don't know what you don't know. So gathering information is key to finding information and evidence that points you in the right direction. So anybody that may have known Alice in any context whatsoever would be important to talk to. So there are guests at the hotel, there are other employees, there are owners, there are people in Alice's life. All of these people who police would speak to at this point aren't suspects. They're just for the purpose of gathering information to hopefully take the investigation in one direction or another.
The police soon begin trying to make contact with the motel's owner, Jeff Harsh. They're finally able to reach him in Barbados to get some background information on the motel, its employees, and guests. The conversation turns to Dennis, who's been painting the motel rooms, but no one's seen him since the night of the murder. Jeff explains Dennis started working at the motel last week. He's a hitchhiker Jeff discovers after a call from another local business owner. Jeff is known around town for helping people when they're down on their luck, offering them work at the motel for $15 a day, as well as a place to stay. Jeff isn't sure he wants to hire someone while he has plans to go out of town. Alice convinces him otherwise. There is work she wants done around the motel and would love to have Dennis do some painting. Eventually, Alice is able to talk Jeff into agreeing. There's also the question of possible theft, and talking to Jeff means the investigators are able to find an answer to another question. Jeff confirms that there is always at least $100 kept in the cash register. With new information at hand, the investigators believe that whoever murdered Alice more than likely also stole the missing $100. This would mean the killer is probably in possession of Alice's lucky quarter.
Well, because investigators found the cash register closed with money missing from inside, there are two possible things that they think may have happened. Either the suspect knew how to open the cash register, or it was already open and they closed it, possibly in an attempt to hide that anything was taken.
Dennis is considered the best lead in the case. Investigators put out an alert with his description, hoping to find him nearby.
Well, time is very important, obviously, and the longer these things go without having somebody as a suspect, the more difficult it is to solve the case. So putting out an alert for their first potential suspect is an attempt by the detectives to, get as much information as quickly as possible.
The investigators get their first tip when a convenience store clerk calls in believing they've seen Dennis. Not only that, but they claim that Dennis paid with a quarter that had a hole in it. Could it be the same quarter that Alice kept in the motel's cash register for good luck? The quarter's luck may have run out before Dennis got his hands on it. Because the convenience store isn't the only place where he's been spotted. Alice Pepperell is found dead in her motel room in the small town of Oakley, Kansas. While the room itself reveals very little about what led to Alice's murder, a missing quarter from the motel's cash register may be the clue that leads the investigation toward its culprit. And with Dennis Perkins, the motel's new hire, going missing after Alice's death, he looks to be the prime suspect. Dennis is reportedly seen paying with what could be Alice's lucky quarter, adding yet more weight to the suspicion that's been placed on him. When the investigators put out an alert for Dennis, it so happens that an off-duty bartender from Scott City is listening in via their police scanner.
I just happened to be listening to it before I went to work that day. We heard him put out a bolo to be on the lookout for this guy, and they gave his description and what he was wearing. They said exactly what he had done. He had murdered a woman in Oakley, and I didn't think any more about it and went into work.
Kelly's shift starts like any other, but about an hour in, everything changes.
He's quiet, he's polite, and I don't recognize him. I know he's out of place. The clothes, the description fits.
Well, one of the benefits of being such a small town is that everyone knows everyone, and strangers stick out just because they're strangers. So when a strange person who is being sought by the police may be around, it certainly makes people aware. And police obviously caught a break in this particular case.
He gets his beer, and I call my mom. And I asked her, I said, did they by chance give anything else about what we were listening to earlier? And she said, yes. And she said, he has a green backpack. Well, I knew at that time that was him because he had a green backpack. And I kind of hesitated, and she says, is he there? And I said, yeah, I think so. She says, I'm calling the police. And that's when we hung up. And I'm trying to talk quietly because he can hear everything.
Investigators dispatch immediately after receiving the tip on Dennis's location. Oak Oakley and Scott City are approximately an hour apart. It's a relatively short distance, but in times like this, every extra second adds to the potential of a suspect getting away. While the investigation still belongs to Oakley, the Scott City police are called in to make the arrest.
You know, just trying to watch him out of the corner of my eye, so you see if he, goes out the back door. I don't want him to leave. It scared me, if he was the one that did it in Oakley, he wouldn't, put it past him to do it elsewhere. So yeah, just kind of glance around the bar to make sure everything was still okay. But yeah, I tried to shield my voice from him because it was dead silent in there.
It's fairly remarkable to have a situation where, an everyday person just going about their business suddenly is in the middle of a police manhunt, essentially. So when somebody sees this suspect and they have to calmly notify the police somehow and hope that the police get there before the suspect leaves, that's a pretty intense moment. And I can imagine there's a lot of anxiety associated with being in that situation.
When the police arrive at the bar, Dennis is found sitting at a table, still drinking a beer.
Next thing I know, about 10 minutes later, the police chief and another officer came in, and I kind of pointed where he was sitting, and they walked back there, and I could hear him ask him who he was, and they wanted him to come with them.
He is arrested on the spot, and just over $77 is discovered on his person.
Dennis is found sitting at the bar and police find $77.60 on his person. So it's certainly suspicious. It's not an unusually large amount of money for someone to have on them. There is the site of Alice's quarter, which is a little bit more suspicious. However, it's certainly not conclusive. It could be a coincidence. Also, even if Dennis stole the money from the cash register, it doesn't necessarily tie him to Alice's death.
Testing confirms that the blood found on Alice's nightgown does not match her own. With the suspect in custody, the forensic team is able to run the blood against Dennis's, and they discover that the blood type is a match. Could this evidence mean that Dennis approached Alice that night? Why would he attack her? Was Alice's murder planned or accidental? Before the investigators arrive in Scott City, local police officer Greg Davis is asked to read Dennis his Miranda rights.
I was coming on duty for second shift, and I went down to the station, and the chief told me that they had a possible homicide suspect in custody. He told me to go back in, they have a holding room, which is where you do interviews, booking procedures and such, and he was back in there. And the chief told me that he wanted him Mirandized and just basically keep him talking. Don't get into the facts of the case because the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, Oakley Police, and Gove County Sheriff's Department were supposed to be en route down there.
When asked to sign a waiver confirming he understands these rights and that he's willing to waive them, he says he can't do it. He tells them that he's unable to read or write. To aid Dennis, each statement of his rights are explained verbally until he confirms he understands. Finally, he is asked if he would like to waive his rights in order to talk, to which he answers yes.
I want to make sure there's no doubt in his mind that he's been Mirandized, that he doesn't have to talk. That's extremely important to me. I want him to know and understand that his rights were important.
Miranda rights advise someone under arrest that they have the right to silence and also that they have the right to a lawyer. This is extremely important that it's done multiple times because if there's any evidence that it was not done properly, that means that anything an accused person says to the police could be deemed inadmissible in court.
Basically started establishing rapport with him and talking to him. Told me he was a handyman that had gotten hired there to help out. And at that point in time, he started saying, well, Drifter's done something bad.
Dennis confesses, but his confession only leads to more questions.
And I said, who's Drifter? And he would say, well, that's my evil twin.
Alice Pepperell is found in her motel room, murdered. The cause of death? Asphyxiation. Very little evidence is found at the scene of the crime, but they do find a small amount of blood that is not a match for Alice. Approximately $100 goes missing on the same night as the murder. Along with this money is a special quarter with a hole in it that was kept for good luck. After putting out an alert with Dennis's description, the police receive a tip that he is seen drinking at a bar in Scott City. When it comes out that Dennis cannot read or write, his rights are read out loud, and he verbally confirms that he waives them. Afterward, Dennis brings up the Drifter, who he claims is his evil twin. Almost immediately after being questioned about the Drifter, Dennis's whole demeanor changes.
Then he dropped his head down and he sat up in the chair and looked me right dead in the face and said, "You're talking to Drifter." He made good eye contact with me and he stuck his chest out. And the more I asked him about Drifter, the more it became apparent he was talking about a personality, another personality that he claimed he had. And he would say, well, that's my evil twin. He started telling me what he did as Drifter. He kept leaning towards it. He had done something to a lady at a motel, and he'd strangled her.
Dennis admits to having been involved in killing Alice, but does not take responsibility. Dennis claims that it was the work of his split personality, who he refers to as the Drifter.
I didn't know what to do at this point in time. I mean, I'm told, don't get into the facts of the case. I just wanted to keep him talking. I did not want a confession out of this guy. And he led me there by dropping his head and sitting up and saying, "You're talking to Drifter, dude." And then he started telling me stuff. At that point in time, what am I gonna do? Say, shut up? No. If he's giving me information, he's been Mirandized, let him talk.
As the conversation goes on, Dennis changes back and forth between his usual demeanor and the personality he refers to as the Drifter.
Dennis was very meek and unassuming, and drop his head and sit up and say, well, I don't know what Drifter did, but it was bad. After we talked a little bit, and he would drop his head again and sit back up and look at me and say, "You're talking to Drifter." He always said, "You're talking to Drifter, dude." Like he was trying to intimidate me or something.
As the confession goes on, it gets deeper into not only the details of the act, but into his history as well. Dennis admits that this was not the first time he raped a dead body. He previously worked for undertakers in Pennsylvania and claims that it was during this job that he first committed such an act.
And then after she was dead, he proceeded to sexually assault her. And he referred to that as moon over paradise. But he'd torn some of her clothing off, and that's when, voila, moon over paradise. It was strange. I've never heard that referred that way before. So I continue listening to him. I'm not trying to interrogate him or get information from him. I'm just listening. He's explaining to me what he did.
When the Oakley investigators arrive, they take over for Greg, but then Dennis shuts down.
The Kansas Bureau of Investigation, Oakley Police, and Gove County Sheriff's Office showed up. I went out and discussed the case with them and discussed what had happened, that he'd been Mirandized. I was just trying to keep him talking. So they went in there to talk to him. And when they went in there, he clammed up. He wouldn't say anything to them. So they came back out and asked me to go in there. And I sat down and talked to him. I introduced him to each of the officers that were there and told him that he needed to talk to them. They were associates of mine.
Dennis also reveals that he has spent time in a mental institution in California, a fact that could corroborate his claim of having this second personality. The trial of Dennis Perkins begins in October of 1989. Dennis goes forward with an insanity defense, citing his split personality being to blame for his actions.
By pleading not guilty by reason of insanity, Dennis is essentially admitting that he committed the actions that make up the offense, but he's saying that because of his mental disorder, he's not culpable and therefore is not guilty of the moral element of the crime. So normally by pleading not guilty by reason of mental disorder, if that defense is accepted, someone would be committed to spend some time at a mental institution instead of in a regular prison.
Partway through the trial, something changes in Dennis. He has a sudden outburst, screaming to everyone in the room. Dennis yells that he did not murder Alice, that she was nice to him and he would never hurt her. He believes he is being persecuted just for being a hitchhiker. Finally, he says he saw the real killer. He knows who did it. Dennis is removed from the courtroom and refuses to return. Is it possible that Dennis lied in his confession or was somehow coerced? Could Dennis have witnessed another man killing Alice? The trial of Dennis Perkins for the alleged murder of Alice Pepperell continues without Dennis's presence, as he refuses to return to the courtroom. The court reaches a guilty verdict, convicting Dennis of first-degree murder, aggravated robbery, and rape. He is sentenced to life for the first charge and 15 years for each of the latter charges.
You know, for investigators, this type of case is something you'd consider rather unique. There's really no apparent motive for this particular case, so it stands out as being somewhat strange.
Dennis sees a psychiatrist regularly, and over the next 2 years makes 6 appeals to his sentence. His claims range from coercion to the lack of competency to stand trial, to improper definitions given to the crimes he was convicted of.
So a key part of Dennis's appeal is competency. So competency basically means whether or not someone's fit to stand trial. And so what that focuses on is whether they have the capacity to understand what's happening to them in the system. If they have the ability to instruct counsel. So if they understand the role of their lawyer, the role of the prosecutor, and the role of a judge. So Dennis is arguing that at the time of his trial, he did not have that competency.
Personally, I did not believe that he had multiple personalities. I felt he was using it to excuse his behavior or to hide what he'd done and justify it. And the way he would flip it on and flip it off is another thing. I felt he was using the system, and he'd learned how to use the system.
Dennis is examined by multiple psychiatrists. In the end, it is determined that he is in fact fit to stand trial. All 6 of his appeals are ultimately rejected, and his convictions stand. Dennis spends the rest of his life in prison, where he dies on August 3rd, 2018.
Dennis Perkins, what he did will always stick with me the rest of my life.
Though Dennis is found guilty for his crimes and punished for all that he has done, it doesn't change the fact that Alice's presence in Oakley continues to be missed. She is mourned by her family and her friends, and the countless lives that she touched.
I was happy that I could be instrumental in catching this guy. I was just glad I could help the family.
A lot of people, both in Scott City and Oakley, had the old belief you could leave your front door unlocked. And I think that changed that. You know, here's some guy that drifts off the highway, and he lands up killing this woman and raping her. That has a definite ripple effect in the community.
Oakley, Kansas is a city most known for its connection to the past, for hunting buffalo in the Wild West or finding ancient fossils. But in the end, it's